This lesson covers creating a Generation 2 virtual machine and when it should be used. The creation of a Generation 2 virtual machine is actually very simple. I can do New Virtual Machine in Hyper-V Manager. I enter a name for the virtual machine. Then the next step is to specify the generation. Generation 1, or in this case I would want the Generation 2. Remember, with a Generation 2 it must be 64-bit Windows 8 or above, or Windows Server 2012. It will be booting from the SCSI controller, or I can boot from the synthetic network adapter. I will then proceed with the installation just like a normal operating system install. One thing that often comes up is, can you convert a virtual machine from a Generation 1 to a Generation 2? And the reality is you really can't, because of the big difference between the disk structures of a Generation 1, i.e. a NTFS system partition compared to a FAT32 system partition with a Generation 2, there's really no simple way to convert. You would essentially have to do a backup, a capture of the Generation 1 VM, and then restore the OS portion to a brand new Generation 2. There really isn't any point to doing this, however, because the performance of a Generation 1 and a Generation 2 virtual machine are really exactly the same. The benefit for a Generation 2 is it will install the OS quicker, it will boot quicker, and then you don't have to have the legacy hardware. But if you already have Generation 1 virtual machines established and running, there really is no point in upgrading them or trying to upgrade them to a Generation 2. When deciding if you should be using a Generation 2 virtual machine, you must first ensure the operating system is even supported in a Generation 2 virtual machine. You then have to be sure you don't require backwards compatibility, for example to Windows Server 2012 Hyper-V, which does not support a Generation 2 virtual machine. You also need to ensure you don't require support in things like Windows Azure, which today are all Generation 1 based. But if your environment is purely Hyper-V 2012 R2, you're not concerned about compatibility with Windows Azure at this time, then you should absolutely go ahead and use the Generation 2 virtual machines for those modern operating systems.